Now, the purpose of this video is to really develop your close reading skills. So we're going to look at a very short extract, but to see exactly how much we can say about it. So the extract we're using is from a Neil Gaiman short story. Now, you may know Neil Gaiman as the writer of Coraline or The Graveyard Book or The Sandman or Good Omens. He's certainly a writer who I would recommend. But Sunless Sea, I think it's called Down to a Sunless Sea, is a short story which is available on the internet if you Google that. So the first thing to do is to make sure you've got a copy of just the opening paragraph to this story. And we know that the opening paragraph, or the opening rather, of any text is called the exposition. That process of the writer establishing character, theme and setting, generally referred to as exposition. There's no rule about how long it has to be, it's just that opening process. And the first thing to do really is to look at reading through this opening paragraph. So we just need to make sure that we know exactly what's going on in it. So the Thames is a filthy beast. It winds through London like a snake or a sea serpent. All the rivers flow into it, the Fleet and the Tyburn and the Neckinger, carrying all the filth and scum and waste, the bodies of cats and dogs and the bones of sheep and pigs down into the brown water of the Thames, which carries them east into the estuary, and from there into the North Sea and oblivion. Now, first thing to do is to check really that you are quite happy with all of the vocab. Now, there might be in any given extract one or two words that you think, not quite sure about that, and you need to kind of develop some strategies for trying to work out what they are. Here, one of those strategies can come into play when we look at this particular list, Fleet and the Tyburn and the Neckinger. Now, we might not have heard those names before, but you can see that just beforehand it talks about all the rivers flow into it, and then it's a fairly good guess that this is a list of rivers. So these are all tributaries, they contribute, all tributaries to the Thames. Then looking at the rest of it, I think most of it is pretty straightforward language. Oblivion may be unusual. It's just if you are oblivious to something, you are unaware of it, and therefore oblivion is kind of unconsciousness, nothingness, a void. An estuary, just in case you need any help with your geography, is the mouth of a river. So if you think that's sea, you've got the river going kind of that way from this is land, and it goes out into the sea. So an estuary can be a bit tidal. So we can see that all these things are being picked up by the Thames and they're being pulled out and then sent to sea. So if we then move on to think, okay, well, we've got this question. How does Gaiman use language, form and structure to present the River Thames? And yes, we can go through and we can pull out some techniques and methods, but we're never going to do that just by itself. We're always going to look at the effect. And remember, any of the ideas or any of the terms that I give you, if you can't remember those, but you spot them happening in a piece of writing, it's not the case that you think, oh, I can't remember that fancy term, so I can't talk about the effect. You always talk about the effect, even if you have to just describe what's happening. Right? It's the effect of the language, that idea that the writer has made a deliberate choice, and the impact of that choice that's actually going to get you the credit. The fancy term, if you can remember the fancy term, is kind of the icing on the cake. So first of all, I'm going to start annotating through, and I start to notice things that I might want to come back to. So I'm going to do a quick kind of underline on anything, and I might kind of just do this. I'm not going to explain what I'm doing at the moment. In fact, I'm going to do that because I'm going to pick up on all of this. But as I'm going through, I'm going to be thinking, right, what am I going to be saying about each of these bits? Okay. So you might have seen that was pretty quick through. And it's just reminding me that I might want to pick up on these so I'm not losing anything. And then I'm going to go and do a kind of proper consideration of why I've underlined these things. So I'm going to change colour so I can see my initial ideas and where I then get. So first of all, the Thames is a filthy beast. Now, I'm aware that is a metaphor, and I don't want to just leave it at saying it's a metaphor. I want to talk about the connotations of filthy and connotations of beast, because we've not just got the idea that, oh, it's a dirty animal. We've got filth kind of carrying ideas of disease and contamination and corruption, beast being power and force and kind of unpredictability and lack of control. It's pretty monosyllabic. You know, it's quite a blunt opening, and I'm going to put it's mainly or largely, you can choose which one, monosyllabic. Filthy messes it up in terms of saying it's entirely monosyllabic. And if you think of mono, one syllable, okay? The one for many syllables, polysyllabic, okay? So it's blunt, it's abrupt, it's direct, it's monosyllabic, it has connotations of. I might also, as well as it being metaphorical, I might also want to include a reference to zoomorphism, which is where you take something and you turn it into an animal. It's like the animal version of personification. Zoo meaning animals morph, change. So it winds through London like a snake or a sea serpent. Now, we know this is a simile. We know that snakes are kind of thought to be unpleasant or generally have negative connotations because you can say venom, danger. We can also talk about biblical allusion and all the kind of bad press that a snake gets for the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, etc. So they are associated with deception, deceit, loss. Sea serpents, we're going kind of the same way with classical allusion. Sea serpents, monstrous, powerful, supernatural, destructive. We notice we've got the sibilants here as well, right? We can talk about the sibilants and the connection with winding. This is all mimetic, okay? If something's mimetic, it mimics something else. So that's sibilance, mimetic of the winding kind of action. We've then got all the rivers flow into it. Well, we're being asked how Gaiman presents the River Thames and the idea that we're using extremes of language. It's not just one or two rivers flow into it, it's all the rivers flow into it. And again, this is kind of still using quite simple language to emphasise, the near factual nature of this river's power. We then get a list, the Fleet and the Tyburn and the Neckinger. There's a rule of three there. So we're not just going to say rule of three, we're going to start talking about the cumulative effect. And this is something that comes into play throughout this extract. If you think of cumulative from accumulate, or the connection there, to build up. So a cumulative effect is the effect of building up. So what's building up? Here, it's all of the rivers. So the idea that all of those rivers are contributing their power to the River Thames. And then we've got the notion of carrying. Okay, so instantly we've got, again, the idea of strength. It is, picking up all the filth and scum and waste. So again, this rule of three. And again, we've got the connotations of dirt and disease. Now, one of the reasons for annotating is to actually kind of link these ideas together, because I want to maybe when I'm talking about the dirt and disease connotations here, I maybe want to say, added to by this effect down here, because I don't want to just keep coming back to, oh, and it's dirty, oh, and it's dirty, oh, and it's dirty. As much as I can, I want to plan my answer and get everything together. So we've got the filth and scum and waste. And then we've got this image of all of these corpses, all of these dead bodies and bodies and bones. And we start to realise, and you can probably see, I started circling ands a little while ago, because this idea keeps coming back. We've got this repetition of an and. And if you're happy with the term polysyndeton, you've probably already been shouting that at the screen. Okay, polysyndeton, or maybe you know it as polysyndactic listing. But either way, it is the term for repetition of a conjunction, and here it's the and. Okay, when you get listing, if you can't remember polysyndactic listing or polysyndeton and there's an and, just say listing, or just say the repetition of the and creates the effect that. It's that point I was talking about before, about don't worry about the fancy term if you can't recall it. If you have a list, just as a kind of idea where there are no ands, but there's commas, it's asyndeton or asyndactic listing. Okay, so asyndactic, asyndeton is commas, polysyndeton, polysyndactic is ands. But we've got this huge build-up, this cumulative effect of everything that's going on with this river, the power of all the rivers contributing to it, all of the waste building up, all of the directions it's going, the general flow. That really is worth commenting on the polysyndeton within this short extract. And we have, obviously, connotations of brown, it's not pleasant. Repetition of carry is there again. And this kind of strange triple of destinations, if you like. The estuary, fine. North Sea, fine. Oblivion, wow. This is a powerful river. If it's going to dispose of you, it's going to kind of make sure you're taken into this void and forgotten. So ultimately, if you're making an argument, if you're trying to come up with your hypothesis in response to this question, which is actually, your big point of how are you going to answer? How does Gaiman use language, form and structure to present the River Thames? Well, he uses all of those things to present it as powerful, as dangerous, as unpredictable, as mystical, as supernatural. Okay, choose which ones you want to kind of prioritise. But your hypothesis is going to be, okay, that's how it's that is how it's presented by Gaiman. Let's look at the techniques he's using to do that in terms of your language, form and structure. But we really want to kind of build up these ideas and connections. So the next thing we do is we're pretty happy with all of those language points. I noticed that actually we've got really quite the long sentence here. We've got a sentence that, if we look at form and structure, starts here and carries on down here, right? And it's multi-claused and it's got lots and lots of conjunctions and it's winding through like the river and it's picking up pace like the river. So we can talk about maybe the sentence length reflecting the meaning. We're never just going to point out that something's a simple sentence or a complex sentence or a compound sentence or a long or a short sentence. You're always going to tie it into the effect, and the content of what's being said. So here, big long multi-clause sentence, it's going to reflect the idea of the river being unstoppable, being powerful. Now, the final thing I'd always ask myself is, do I have any alternative interpretations of this? Because the wonderful thing about English, or the frustrating thing about English, depending on whether you're a fan or not, is that it's interpretative. You actually get more credit for exploring ambiguity, those kind of things that could mean this, could mean that. And so far, I've kind of really focused on the fact that this is a river which is horrible and dirty and polluting and polluted and dangerous. But I stop and ask myself, well, what would happen to all of this filth and scum and waste and these corpses and bits of animals if the river didn't take them out of London? Well, London would be kind of festering in them and becoming kind of diseased. So I think as much as I think there's a strong case for saying that the river is dirty and dangerous, it is, the metaphorical filthy beast, I also think I should be adding a point that says, alternatively or ironically, the river could also be viewed as a cleansing force for London, as it removes all the corruption and contamination from the city into the North Sea and beyond. And you don't have to decide, in fact, you shouldn't decide which one you believe. You would say this could also be understood, or alternatively, it could be interpreted as. So after doing all of that scribbling and all of that thinking, I now want to just make sure that my material in it is in as good an order as possible. And I want to make sure that I've, as far as I can, grouped like ideas together, that I'm not repeating ideas, that if I'm using a topic sentence to say the river is presented as this, I'm bringing all of that evidence to bear at that point. And actually, for something like this, I want to explore what I can do. I want to try and push my use of language. I want to try and push my use of interpretation. I want to say a lot about a little, knowing that actually you've got to experiment, because if you don't experiment, you won't know what works and what doesn't work. Okay, I hope this helps. Good luck.